Hey, we're live with the MMA Vivisection. This is Zane Simon, and I'm here to break it down for you with Eddie Mercado and Victor Rodriguez. And we're here to talk about World Series of Fighting 26, all the fights, most of the fights. We might skip a couple. In what is now a big week for World Series of Fighting. You know, it's a pretty good event. Looks like great on paper, but most recently some breaking news, rumors in the ether, we will say, because it's not 100% confirmed. I haven't, it's not a public announcement, but it sounds like Ali Abdelaziz is on his way out of World Series of Fighting. Vic, what are your thoughts?
All right. First off, it's a rather thorny set of circumstances, and there's a lot of, uh, I guess there's a lot of ramifications. There are a lot of directions this could go in. A lot of the allegations, primarily those that have to do with the conflict of interest of him being the unofficial matchmaker, but somehow being officially the executive vice president of World Series of Fighting, and how that somehow may be a position that he was using to benefit himself and his fighters through dominance MMA, which of course,
Maybe. These are
maybe,
things we've heard. We don't,
right. I
we
mean,
don't know.
there's a lot of leeway, there's a lot of stretching, and the reality is with this and many other of the allegations that are perhaps a little more serious and that stretch a little further outside of fighting, we may very well not know the whole truth. There's just there's so many factors involved with this, and it is a bit of a sad thing to see because you finally get an organization like World Series that this year has made tremendous strides in getting itself together, and now, well, we end up with something like this to cap off the year. It's a bit of a problem. He's recruited some pretty, very, very good talent, and they've done a remarkable bit of turning around, despite many other things, and despite themselves too, because they've kind of gotten in their own way. But yeah, it's something that certainly we need to wait and see a little more here before we start making any other jumping to any further conclusions. But it certainly is interesting to see how this shakes out, and not only that, how it affects any other promotions as well that may be going through any similar situations.
Eddie, what are your thoughts on it?
Well, they're definitely. Well, first off, find me on Twitter at the Eddie Mercado.
There you
Give us
go.
a like on YouTube. Subscribe to MMANation.com. Read Bloody Elbow.
Sell
Basic
always-
martial arts. If you're in the 757, go check them out. Gracie Jiu-Jitsu Certified Training Center.
Always
Outside
his
of that.
first thoughts. Always his first thoughts.
Business first, man.
You gotta sell it, baby. You gotta sell it. Go get it.
People don't want to wait to the end. They want it now. Instant gratification. But no, this move is going to be impactful for sure. Like Vic was saying, the recruiting has been stellar as of late. And, man, I really hope they're not in self-destruct mode right now. And this is the sign of things to come, business-wise, where they're going back to the, kind of shit show that was of old. But we'll see what happens. I don't know. I'm kind of nervous.
It's a weird thing to me because, Abdelaziz was kind of put up for a lot of people, and I don't know to what degree this is true or not, but it seemed like he was very much front and center in the problems for World Series of Fighting. That was the basic word on the street, was that he was the guy that was just constantly screwing things up, and one of the big reasons that they just seemed like they were running themselves into the ground and a problem. So in that way, it could be a good thing for the organization, but he also does seem like the guy that was bringing in all the good talent.
Yeah.
He seems like the guy that was delivering especially with the Russian fighters, that's delivering all of these Russian guys that nobody else is going out and scouting and getting and bringing to the U.S. And it does make you, anytime I see a major part of a promotion get removed, you immediately have to wonder about the future of that promotion. I mean, we saw this with Super Fight League, where one of their backers went to prison, and they were like, "Oh yeah, we'll keep going," and they're gone, they're dead. Or we saw with Cage Warriors lost a couple internal people, and suddenly Cage Warriors is dead. They keep talking about they're coming back. We keep hearing about these major announcements, but not seeing it.
But on the flip side, look at Bellator.
Yeah.
I mean, they made a huge change, and it's been it's been paying off for him.
But
Right.
for them too, that came from like the network. You know, that was like the network saying we're going to change this up and keep everything rolling, rather than this, which is like inside we don't know what this, you know, what they want to do, what the future plans are.
Yeah, and it's almost universally agreed, unfortunately, that ousting Rebny to bring in Coker was a massive upgrade for bringing the Bellator to a different level. Whereas this is more of a situation in which, and we said some similar things about Sean Lattman, although you could argue that he detracted far more than he contributed from the looks, again, allegedly, from the looks of the things that have come out that we've seen or that we've heard. With Ali Abdelaziz, yeah, sure, he brought in a lot of talent and he put on some great matches, but you know, if he was that much more trouble than what he was worth, it could actually not even be that bad a thing. He could still work with them in a scouting capacity. He could still work with them in an extra official capacity, not even be on the books. You know, so it's, you know, he's still going to have fighters coming in, and he's still going to be making money off the back end that way as an agent. So, you know, as a manager,
it does make me wonder a little though, because technically he can't really. Like that's the thing with like the Nevada law is that like if you're involved in an official capacity with running a promotion, you can't promote fighters as well. Like you can't manage fighters as well.
right? But then again, you've got Titan FC doing similar things.
Oh
I
yeah,
mean,
but
Alchemist
everybody does it, which is what
Yeah.
makes me wonder about. Like
You know,
you look at RFA, and that's like Andre Pedernera's, you know,
no, I'm sorry.
or not
RFA is Ed Suarez.
Ed Suarez's. That's right, not
Yeah.
Andre Pedernera's, but Ed
But
Suarez's baby.
Pedernera's runs Judo Brazil.
Yeah, Pedernera's is Judo Brazil,
You know,
and
the guy who runs XFC Brazil, whose name escapes me, he manages fighters, I believe, or has some association with that. So
yeah, and I can't. Oh, was Jungle Fight? Is Jungle Fight
Walid Ismail.
Bali Dishmail? Yeah. So like this is basically just this is just like standard practice for MMA. So it does like it's kind of weird to see somebody actually get thrown out for it, because it's like, well, what kind of precedent are you actually setting? Are you willing to like go through everybody's books and start auditing people?
Or maybe what other problems are there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's a big change for World Series of Fighting, and it's weird because it comes right in, you know, it's the bigger news this week on top of a card that, while it's not going to get a lot of casual fans excited, is one of the best World Series of Fighting cards top to bottom in terms of talent.
Yeah.
So that's what we're here to talk about, most importantly. And first up on the dock, we are talking Hakeem Dawodu versus Marat Magomedov. Eddie, start this out.
First off, Hakeem Dawodu, super exciting talent from Canada. I mean, amazing Muay Thai. I mean, phenomenal strikes, dynamic, mixing it up, punches, knees, kicks, elbows. I mean, the whole shebang. Some pretty solid clinch work. We saw him make his debut, I believe, his last time out. And he went through some early adversity, escaped some submission attempts, got off the ground, and came back and gassed out Chuka Willis and put the stamp on him. And he looked really good. This fight's going to be a little bit more different. His wrestling defense is going to be challenged. He's fighting Marat Magomedov, who is a Russian who, you know, he has that standard, I'm going to grab a hold of you and take you to the ground and either beat you up or submit you. So it's a real interesting clash in styles. I'm really looking forward to it. Magomedov's a little bit hittable, though, from what I've seen, and that is not something you want to have going for you when you're fighting Hakeem Dawodu. So I'm expecting probably a knockout finish, probably of the highlight persuasion for Hakeem. So excited.
All right, Vic.
The highlight persuasion. I love that. That sounds great. All right. Well, you know, my biggest complaint about Hakeem Dawodu thus far has been that we haven't seen him fight, number one, more often, and number two, in the United States, you know, and put on a more prominent card. You know, it's good that he's on this card. I wish he were on the main card personally, but he's always fun to watch. I've said this before. He is must-watch MMA. This guy is really exciting. He's not your average kickboxer. He's very dynamic. very diverse with his striking. His movement is really good, and he's adapted it well for MMA and making use of sidestepping and being able to implement a very solid degree of wrestling takedown defense. Now, as Eddie mentioned, he's going to be taking on a guy who actually competed in, I believe, some sort of pancration event against Ali Bagotinov a while ago. Very legitimate grappler, and it does give me a bit of pause when fighting someone like Daouda because his chain wrestling looks pretty decent. I'm not sure if he's going to be the kind of wrestler that Daouda's faced before, but I'd imagine that it's the kind of thing that Daouda's prepared for as well. Now, taking that into consideration, Magomedov is currently 7-0 as a featherweight. He's, maybe not fought some of the biggest names on the European circuit, but then again, Daouda hasn't really faced very famous opposition, to put it that way. Both of them have fought very tough guys. Both of them have come across very well with their respective skill sets. So I'm going to go with Daouda just by virtue of the fact that he's been striking for so long and he has a deeper understanding of MMA, the MMA game as a whole, it appears, and the way he fights. So I definitely would go with that, and I would agree with Eddie that it's going to probably be some sort of a pretty brutal finish, maybe sometime around late in the second round.
One of the things that'll be interesting for me to see is that for a lot of Russian fighters, they tend to be pretty undersized relatively. Like there's not nearly as much a focus on weight cutting over there. So especially for wrestlers and grapplers, they end up having to move down divisions, and it ends up changing some parts of their style when they come over. So I'll be interested to see that with Magomedov coming over, as it looks like at least his last bout out was at featherweight. I don't know where he was before that. But if he's like a fully legit sized featherweight for the U.S., that could be a big difference maker too for somebody like Daouda, whose takedown defense isn't god awful,
Mm-hmm. Do we have odds on these?
We do not have odds on this fight. We do not have odds up until we only have odds on the main card. So yeah. That means our next prelim fight, we don't have odds for that either, but we'll jump right in. Abubakar Nurmagomedov, Danny Davis Jr., Vic, who you got?
Well, Abubakar, who we saw in his last outing in World Series of Fighting, he's, despite the famous last name, he seems to have a similar style to Khabib Nurmagomedov. Don't expect the same guy. Please do not have the expectation that you're going to see the same exact thing. He is picking up a bit of seasoning. He's fighting more experienced guys now that he's fighting in the U.S., and this is a very, very good test. Danny Davis Jr. is pretty well-rounded. He seems to be a bit of a generalist at first, but then you kind of see that his wrestling game is a little better than what might appear at first. He seems to be able to have a really good sense of positioning and being able to work from there. His record is a bit deceptive at 11-9. He was thrust into some fights earlier on that he should not have been taking, but yeah, he's a very, very solid test, and I still have to favor Nurmagomedov here. He does seem to have a more pause and controlled approach to fighting, and I really do think, though, however, that his grappling is really going to be the biggest strength here. His ability to control, his ability to react and time what he needs to get his timing in for his attacks, they're ultimately going to be the biggest factor here. I would certainly say that he could very well grind out a decision here or probably get a late submission.
All right, Eddie?
Yeah, I definitely agree with pretty much everything Vic said. Abubakar, phenomenal Dagestani pressure wrestler, somewhat of a poor striking game. He's not exactly polished in that area. And he's taken on a guy that's been around the block a time or two. Danny Davis Jr. is 11-9-1. And 5 of those 9 losses are submissions. And I think that is probably Abubakar's path to victory in this fight. Danny Davis Jr., he's 3-1 in the World Series of Fighting, which is pretty damn good. And, like Vic was saying, I feel like this is just a really good test for Abubakar. He's being matched up against a guy whose strength is pretty much the wrestling. And that's where Abubakar is going to thrive. So, it's tough when you have guys who go up against other guys whose strengths are the same, but one is just, leaps and bounds ahead of the other. So although I see this being competitive and going over a round, I think Abubakar will probably get a late submission, like Vic was saying. So Abubakar, Nurmagomedov, round 3 submission.
Yeah, it's one of those things too where he's kind of a deceptive athlete where, he doesn't necessarily look like the athlete he is when he's in the cage. He seems to outperform his expectations a little. Just watching him on tape. I definitely think that he's a good pick there. He's got that combat sambo game, such a strong wrestler, and may not be flashy striking or good striking necessarily, but it's that ability to like perfectly time punches coming in and like leaping in and stuff like that, and hitting really hard when you do that. It's something it can be very tough for a lot of U.S. fighters to deal with because it's just not part of the metagame here.
Did we ever find out what his relation is to?
He's a cousin who's adopted into the family.
Okay.
So he's been adopted into Khabib's direct family, raised as Khabib's brother, but he's a cousin.
So is he blood related, like a blood cousin?
Yeah. Blood relative.
Okay.
But just like a cousin who got adopted and was,
Gotcha.
like I say, raised as Khabib's little brother. That brings us to the main card now. So those are online prelims. There are 2 others that we're not going to talk about. They're not worth the time. First main card fight, light heavyweight bout, Jake Hyun, Clinton Williams. So, Eddie, I believe it's you. Take it away.
Yeah, yes, sir. This is a 205 match. Pretty excited. Originally, it was supposed to be Jake Hyun against Mr. Spong himself, but unfortunately, the MMA gods just hate us and hate us big time. So instead, we're going to see Clinton Williams, come into play. He's 7-2. He's, man, from what I've seen, it's kind of, it's like he doesn't have any kind of footwork whatsoever. From what I've seen, he kind of just stands in front of you. It's like he practices his footwork in a bathroom closet. He just kind of stays in the same spot over and over. And he's got a decent wrestling game, I guess, as far as the top game goes. I mean, if he gets you down, he will fucking lay on you. He takes position over submission to the extreme. Like, he will take you down and legitimately lay on you, either until the ref stands it up, the round ends, or the guy on the bottom's like, screw this, choke me out, I'm done. The guy who's fighting, Jake Hyun, American top team guy, he's exciting to watch. I mean, he's coming to bang. We've seen in his past fights that, he didn't necessarily have setups for his strikes or a certain polish that, we'd like to see. However, he has been training with Tiger Muay Thai. He went over there, and I actually talked to him earlier today, and he said, he learned some fancy tricks from those guys, and expect to see a little more polish, a little more timing with his striking, and I believe him. I think, he got choked out by Clifford Starks, no shame in that, and then came out and won by the same choke that submitted him in the previous fight against Davin Clark, and that was on 10 days' notice. And I mean, he showed excellent cardio throughout that whole fight, which on 10 days' notice is super impressive. So I think this might be a showcase fight for Jake Hyun. I feel like he's gonna put on a show. So.
All right, Vic, what are your thoughts?
All right. First off, to add to Eddie's point, this isn't just. It's really sad with Jake Hyun because he was supposed to fight Teddy Holder at one point. I remember that falling apart, and then now he was supposed to fight Tyrone Spong, and now he's ending up with a replacement, which is also a very, very reliably tough guy. When you're talking about a guy in Clinton Williams who trains out of, or at least used to train out of, Extreme Couture, 7-2 as a professional. And he's mostly, I guess he considers himself mostly a kickboxer, but he does have a very heavy top game in terms of striking. Now, oddly enough, he requires a degree of space in which to operate. Like, he loads up his shots from far back in order to be able to do even more damage. That might not always work against opponents that aren't keeping themselves as open, or an opponent that's got really good movement from the bottom. So I do sense that there are going to be some problems for him fighting against a guy like Jake Hyun, who not only has a pretty solid smothering top game, but also someone who is not going to just stay there in one spot. Williams hits really hard, and on top of that, he's got pretty decent takedowns. He hits really, really hard with some of his shots, especially with some. Those leg kicks don't look as polished as they should be. Now, the problem is that he does not seem to do very well from the bottom position on the ground, and that's where I think he's going to falter in this bout. I would certainly favor Jake Hyun. I think he's going to probably just grind him out and keep striking him. And I would certainly see this going to a pretty clear-cut decision later on, especially since Williams' cardio does not look that great. Hopefully that's something that Hyun's been working on and would. I mean, as of now, even without seeing that, I would certainly favor him having an advantage there. So, yeah, I'll certainly go with Hyun.
All right. And the odds are that Hyun is the favorite, minus 140 up to minus 160. Clinton Williams, the underdog, plus 110 to plus 134. I'd definitely like to see Hyun win and keep winning. He seemed like a really bright prospect a couple of years ago, even with his kind of janky record. I remember when he was on Tough. He looks like a really solid, like he has the basic tools of a really solid power kickboxing game. But I guess maybe he just kind of reminds me a little like Pat Barry, where it's just like you see these tools and you see a good, powerful athlete, and then you see some like fight IQ decisions, and you're just like, what the hell is going on here?
Yeah, I mean, we saw that when he fought Clifford Starks. I mean, he kept kicking him to the body, knowing that Starks was going to try to take him down.
Yeah.
So that's definitely a hole in his game, is his fight IQ.
Yeah, I would like to see him get a win here because I think he still looks like a good talent, but hopefully he doesn't have too much of that Pat Barry thing going on because that's kind of who he reminds me of.
At least Pat Barry either finishes or get finished, though. I mean, you got to give him that.
Yeah, and I mean, Hyun is kind of the same, isn't he? I mean,
yeah, 4 losses, 4 submission losses.
Yeah. Yeah, he's very much the same kind of fighter. It's either he's going to knock you out or he's going to lose.
I definitely see him getting the finish in this one.
Yeah. All right, on that note, next up, Shaman Moraes, Robbie Peralta. Let's see. I think we led with...
It's Vic's turn.
It's Vic's turn. So, Vic, you got a case for Robbie Peralta here?
Well, let's try this out. First off, we're dealing with a guy who, despite his last 2 losses, which saw him leaving the UFC, Robbie Peralta, probably the second best talent that we've seen come out of the Explode Gladiator scene thus far, making not the biggest impact in major promotions, but he's done fairly well for himself. Mm-hmm. He's got a very notable degree of improvement that you see from his earlier fights, and he's going to be fighting a guy who's first and foremost a kickboxer. Shaman Moraes had an excellent fight against Marlon Moraes a while back, it ended up being a situation where the grappling is what ultimately undid Shaman. And I think that something similar could be said here. I think Peralta at least has the basic wrestling and the ability to improve his position and work on the ground. Shaman's takedown defense to me appears to be more than anything based on his physical ability, based on using his strength and muscling his way out of things and trying to, not so much dig in his heels and kind of, shift his hips and get heavy, but much more, just really pushing back, and that's only going to last you for so long. I think that at some point Peralta is really going to be able to just shoot in for a takedown, and Shaman may not have much left in the tank to be able to stop that. So I don't know what the odds are on this. I don't know if the odds are necessarily good, but it wouldn't be that crazy to think that Peralta could win this by decision if he decides to implement that wrestling game, especially if he starts working a clinch game against the cage and breaking him down from there. I'm talking about knees to the legs, foot stomps, things of that nature to debilitate and nullify the kickboxing game, because if Shaman doesn't have anything to stand on, well, then he's not going to be able to launch those kicks, which are his biggest asset, along with the 1-2 shots down the middle that he's really good at. So, yeah, I actually don't think it's that insane to pick Robbie Peralta for this one.
All right. Eddie?
Does that mean you are picking Peralta?
You know what? I got a little bit of alcohol in me right now, so I'm going to say yes. Why the hell not? I'm actually going to go with Robbie Peralta by decision on this one.
All right.
I appreciate your honesty.
Mm.
I feel like this is a coin flip. I feel like Shaman Moraes is a phenomenal Muay Thai kickboxer. We saw that. He went toe-to-toe with Marlon Moraes, and that was fun to watch. I feel like he lost that fight because of the pocket punching. He would get into exchanges and he was on the wrong end of those exchanges. Like, they're both throwing 3-punch combos, but he's the one getting rocked and dropped. And that's where Robbie Peralta thrives. He thrives in those, multi-combo exchanges that, his punches come from awkward angles that you don't expect, and they're heavy. They're bombs. It's coming from the West Coast, boom. And Shaman will do the same. Like, he will throw the same type of punches. Like, he has the ability to sit back and be technical, but he also has a willingness to get in there and brawl. And that might be his downfall. And obviously we saw the ground game be his demise, Moraes' demise, when Marlon rocked him in one of those exchanges, took him down, held him down, choked him out. And there's really no reason why Peralta can't do the same. He's got the experience. He survived with some of the top guys that the UFC had to offer, Clay Guida's, Thiago Tavares's. He can, although he got grapple fucked by a bunch of those guys, he still hung in there and didn't, he didn't quit. But he doesn't have to worry about that now. So it's like, without having to worry about being taken down, can he go out there and just let the hands fly? I think he can. I really think he can. And Shaman is just untested. So
you're picking Peralta too.
If Peralta can make it ugly, I can definitely make a case for him. He's never been knocked out. But this one, when I write this out on my notes, I circle the winner. For this one, I circled versus. Just because, man, I just don't know. I circled Peralta.
Yeah,
Peralta.
There are a couple things here at work for me too, especially Peralta's not, for as long as he's been around, as much as we've seen him, it's not like he's an old, worn-out fighter. He started fighting in 2007. He's still in the prime of his career right now. Peralta he reminds me a lot of OSP, except that he fought in a much deeper division. Like, he was a great athlete that never improved technically. Like, and he fought out of Explode Fight Team. Like, how much better was he gonna get?
Yeah.
And so he is a great athlete. Peralta's fast. He hits hard. He's tough as nails. But he's still the guy that got subbed out in like the very first moment he got taken down by Thiago Tavares. And Tavares is a good submission artist, but it was just like suddenly Peralta looked like he'd never grappled before.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. Like, I don't know where to put him in this fight, because he's got, you got another top athlete in front of him that's also got a decided technical edge over Peralta. Peralta does not have a technical game. But I would definitely, I think I have to lean Peralta here, because you know how tough he is, and you know how aggressive he is. And toughness and aggression and being a good athlete, and Peralta is a good athlete, those three things will win you most fights against less experienced competition.
Yeah, and not only that, I think it should also be mentioned, he's not a moron. The guy knows he's not going to be able to hang toe-to-toe 100% of the time with Shaman. He may get the better of the exchanges, maybe once or twice, out of 10 times, to just throw a number out there. But I mean, he knows what he has to do to make this happen. So, yeah.
Odds on this fight: Shaman Moraes is the favorite, -146 up to -150. Robbie Peralta, the underdog, +115 to +124. I think that's all record shine, frankly. That Peralta just, coming out of the UFC does not have a pretty record at 18-6, but I don't know a lot of other really great reasons to automatically assume that Moraes is the better fighter here.
No, especially not considering his other opposition. I mean, the most legit guy that he fought was that fight against Marlon. So,
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy. I don't agree with those odds. I think they're backwards, if anything.
Especially considering, too, that Moraes is coming up from bantamweight, and Peralta's been a pretty decent-sized featherweight his whole career. So,
yeah, I don't know. I mean, we've seen Peralta, like when he fought Esteban Payan. He was like, man, I'm not going to stand here and bang it out with this guy. I'm going to take him down.
Yeah.
Which he did, but turns out Payan was better on the ground.
Yeah. Peralta's not, like I say, he's not technical anywhere, and he never has been, but he's a good athlete. And it's just a question of, is Moraes experienced? Payan was experienced enough to take advantage of that. Is Moraes? Not that I can see,
Yeah, there's no evidence to support that.
So that brings us to Josh Hill, Bekbolat Magomedov. Eddie?
I'm excited for this one, mainly because I don't know how it's going to pan out. I like both guys. I feel like, Bekbolat, he's 16-0. He's, the archetypal Dagestani pressure wrestler who, has insane, heavy top control. Beautiful. He's got chain submissions where he can link one to the other. If he doesn't like it, he will bail for the top position, which I love to see. That's position over submission all day. Former Sambo champion, highly active. He fought 9 times in 2013. But this is his first fight inside of the U.S. So that's always a factor. We'll see, how that plays into it. He's positionally awesome. I mean, he's a really gnarly wrestler, grappler. Only thing I don't really like is, he's somewhat hittable at times. I feel like he gets caught, a little too freely, and that might be the end of him in this one, perhaps. The guy he's fighting, Josh Hill, 12-1, former tough guy, tough 18. Actually beat Paddy Holohan to get in the house for that tough season. But I don't know. This one's tough. Hill's super tech. I mean, his fundamentals are sound defensively. He doesn't really make many mistakes. He's got heavy hands. He's got really good movement. This one's tough. This is another coin flip for me. I feel like he's fought better competition, and
Definitely has.
he might be. Well, I mean, he went toe-to-toe with Moraes. He actually rocked Moraes early with an uppercut in that fight and shattered his nose. So, I mean, he can go toe-to-toe with anybody, I feel confident in saying, especially someone who has a way more poor striking defense than Marlon Moraes does Magomedov. So, it's probably an unpopular pick, but I think Josh Hill is the more complete fighter. And as long as he can avoid being stalled against the fence, I feel like he's going to edge out a decision in this one. So I picked Josh Hill by decision.
All right, Vic.
All right. Well, I'm going to partially agree with that. What I do disagree with, I don't think it's as an unpopular position as you may think. I really do think Josh Hill should be the favorite here. I don't know. Again, I haven't seen the odds. I don't know what that is, but based on, number one, the level of experience that he's faced, and number two, that fight with Moraes, I think we really, when we did the preview for that, we really didn't expect him to do as well as he did. And he kept a lot of the fight standing. He did very well in a lot of those exchanges. He stayed in Marlon's face, and it was a hell of a fight. That was a really good fight between those two. And you can only deduce that he's improved since then. He's going to be taking on a guy who's been a wrestler who, Bekbulat Magomedov is a guy who's fought in the European scene. He's fought in China, and I believe at one point he was slated to fight Will Chope in the UFC. Don't quote me on that because I'm not entirely sure. But
Hmm.
you know, that's accurate. Oh, okay.
Yeah. He was. It may have been Chope, but he was at some point he was signed by the UFC, but he was still under contract for Rough, and they had to like cancel it because he couldn't
That's
get
what happened.
a
Okay.
contract.
Okay. Well, I mean, all these things notwithstanding, he hasn't fought the level of opposition that Josh Hill has. He hasn't fought fighters that are as complete as Josh Hill has, from at least from as far as uh, some of the footage that we've been able to find. Um, I don't really give him that many avenues to win. Is it impossible? No, absolutely not. I just don't think it's as likely. You got a guy who's a really good wrestler, but unfortunately, despite his stand-up being as basic as it is and as strong as it is, he's very poised, he's very composed, he keeps himself right in the middle, his feet under him, but he doesn't really seem to wake up until it's time to get into a dogfight. When he's in the phone booth with his opponent, that's when he really lets it go, and that's where he's going to have a propensity to get hit against a guy like Josh Hill who hits pretty damn hard. That's going to cost him. And I got to wonder how much he's going to be relying on his chin for that. Other than that, if he decides to make it a wrestling match, well, he better bring lunch. It's going to be a long day because Josh Hill can wrestle. Josh Hill can actually avoid a lot of things. He can do pretty well in certain scrambles and end up in favorable positions and try to snatch something. So I don't know if this would eventually go to a decision. I'm not sure how this fight. I don't really. This is a really tough one to call as to how it would end, but I don't think it's. It really is the most reasonable thing to pick Josh Hill in this bout.
Yeah, you guys are both picking Hill then?
Yeah, that's crazy.
And I am, yes.
The odds on this, Magomedov is the favorite, minus 176 to minus 200. Hill is the underdog, plus 150 to plus 154. So
That's
maybe
crazy.
maybe a chance bet there. Who knows?
Maybe.
Um, that brings us to our co-main event: Ozzy Dugalubgov versus Nick Heron Webb. Victor?
Oh boy. All right. Ozzy is a fighter who we've covered before, and I'm very happy to see Ozzy fight. I like seeing his development thus far. He's sort of made these slow and steady improvements. He's done really well for himself thus far. Probably not the household name that some people would want to see. That fight with Melvin Gillard that never happened. That was a real loss. I think. I think we would have seen a lot of fun, regardless of who would have won. Um, got a bit of a problem here with the. I have to question the decision here to have him fight Nick Heron Webb, who is a talented fighter. He comes out of that Alaska scene, and he's currently 18-6 as a professional. He's got 14 submissions on his record. Problem is that he's another one of those fighters that has a certain level of opposition. That ceiling of opposition is just right there. There's a certain level of guy that he just can't seem to get over that hump and beat. He's lost to the most notable opposition that he's faced. Guys like Igor Araujo, guys like Sheldon Westcott, Andy Enns, Rob Yunt. These are guys that we've all seen kind of go on and do bigger and better things, and the guys that he's beaten have not. Does that mean he's not a good fighter? No, not necessarily. These fights took place quite some time ago, and he very well may have made improvements since then. Do I think that he is complete enough a fighter to pose the kind of threat to beat a guy like Dugalubgov? I'm not really sure. I don't really see it happening. I don't think his striking is as polished as Ozzy's. I don't think his FIQ. There we go.
Yes.
There we go. I don't think his FIQ is as sharp as Ozzy's is, and that's not saying that he's not a smart fighter. That's just saying that Ozzy seems to have better snap decision making in those situations. So I would certainly favor Ozzy in this one. And I mean, again, I don't know the method, but I would certainly say that Ozzy would have to win this fight.
All right, Eddie?
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to see how it pans out. I feel like when guys come down from the Alaskan scene, they don't really do too well. I don't know why. Maybe it's just the level of competition or the amount of training you can actually get done with top flight.
It's a really unregulated scene. There aren't, a lot of huge gyms up there, so even if there's a good camp or two, you're not going to get a ton of fighters. Like, a lot of the opposition isn't going to be coming out of good camps.
Yeah, and there's not as much cross-pollination either. You're not really, yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway.
But you know, but he was the champion up there for the AFC Alaskan Fighting Championship. He's 18-6, and 14 of those are by submission. So I mean, he definitely has the skills to pay the bills. You know, he's fought some good guys, some guys you've seen in the UFC. You know, striking wise, he kind of wings his punches a bit, wings his combos out there, and you know, that leaves some serious holes in his striking game. And against, you know, Dugalubov, I feel like he's got the kind of striking power that is going to exploit that. You know, Ozzy, like he's got such massive like kicks and punches that he doesn't necessarily set up, and he doesn't necessarily throw a lot, like a high volume of strikes, but they're super effective, and when they land, they hurt you. It almost reminds me of Beneil Dariush, like the way he'll throw like solo body kicks. You know that, you know, you're taught you set your kicks up. You don't ever kick to the body or the leg without setting it up with a punch first. But the way Dariush does it, it's so like you either block it or you get crushed by it. Like there's no alternatives, and that's kind of how Ozzy throws his. So I mean, the power advantage definitely goes to Ozzy in this. The cardio will probably go to Webb. Webb has been 5 rounds twice in his career, so I would probably eke out the cardio to Webb on this one, Heron Webb. But I got to go Ozzy here. I think he's just too much of the better athlete. So
yeah,
I'm going to pick Ozzy.
I mean, the only loss we've seen on Ozzy Dugalubgov's record so far is his loss to Johnny Nunez, who's on the undercard by split decision. Oh, an early one to Mike Wade, who, like, he seems to have the potential to lose to random dudes, but especially like the Nunez fight, that was a case of where like they're pretty equal athletes, and then it was just, you know, one low volume style against a grinder.
Yeah.
And I think the big thing with, you know, Dugalubgov, a lot of it is going to be, are you as good an athlete as him? If you are, he's not that hard a fighter to beat. But if you aren't, it's going to be really, really tough. And Nick Heron Webb does not look like he can match Dugalubgov there.
Yeah. The Dougal is a beast.
He is. On that note, the odds are Dugalubgov -500 to -550. Heron Webb, the underdog, +325 to +422. So nothing shocking there. That brings us to our main event, featherweight title fight. Team Alpha Males Lance Palmer versus Alexandre Kappa Tau. Eddie, take it away.
I'm definitely excited for this. I'm a Lance Palmer fan. The dude is a stud. He's an alpha male. You know, no pun intended there. He obviously trains at Team Alpha Male. Guys fighting Kappa Tau is 17-5 with 13 submissions, and 9 of those are by rear naked choke. So the man likes to choke people out. We saw that with Saul Almeida. He choked him out in the first round, which is awesome. You know, he's one of those guys where you get him down and he will not stop chaining submissions together. Like, he has a really active guard. He's going to continue to work for something, continue to make you be defensive while you're on top of him. You know, striking-wise, he tends to brawl a little too much, but, you know, he's got the cardio to support that kind of style. You know, it's not the prettiest, but he will get out there and throw bolos with the best of them. You know, his takedowns are a little questionable. He tends to kind of take some poor shots, but you know, he's pretty solid on the ground. Problem is, Lance Palmer is phenomenal on the ground. I mean, 4-time Division I All-American wrestler at Ohio State, super like hyper athletic guy. I mean, and his last fight against Chris Hordecki, I mean, he looked super fluid on his feet. I mean, he looked crisp. He almost looked like a striker. And I love to see guys that have such a definitive wrestling background transition into striking in a similar way, to where they pick up everything really fast and just start looking really good. So Lance Palmer is becoming a really well-rounded champion, and I love it. You know, couple things though. There are some holes in his game and his jiu-jitsu. You saw that he had Hordeki's back and allowed Hordeki to spin around on top of him, and you know, so there are certain holes at certain times in his game. However, I don't think Kappa Tau really has a shot in this at all. So outside of a Hail Mary submission, I got to go Lance Palmer. In fact, I think Lance Palmer is going to get the knockout on the feet.
All right. Vic?
All right. Well, first off, we need to shine a little more light on Almeida here because he's someone that perhaps his last fight was probably his first fight here in the U.S. anyway. You may not have seen much about him. I know we didn't talk about him much last time. That said, he is a very exciting guy to watch. You know, he tore up the Brazilian regional scene fighting for Jungle Fight, and he does have a ton of submissions on his record. Some very fun scrambles, a lot of quick bouts, a lot of first round fights, a lot of first round wins, I should say. His last bout against Saul Almeida, I guess we didn't really expect to see that much. It was more of a litmus test to see how he'd fight against someone who's got more of an American style of MMA, someone who's got much more of a heavy pressure game, a little more of a generalist, I guess, than just a jiu-jitsu guy who learned how to throw some punches, or a Muay Thai guy who's learned how to sprawl, which is a lot of what you see on the Brazilian scene, unfortunately, to this day. But you know, this is a very interesting matchup for multiple reasons. You know, Lance Palmer, very exciting style, very good wrestler. He's going to have a he's going to have a notable size advantage in terms of just being a stockier guy, being someone who's really good at using his weight to his advantage in terms of taking a guy down and keeping his position, being able to strike the pass, being able to set things up from there. But you got to wonder how well he's going to be able to stay on his P's and Q's. I don't think that he's going to just be facing Almeida's guard. I think he's also going to be having to worry about sprawls and, you know, front headlock attacks, things of that nature. Maybe going for some kind of crazy armbar. I certainly wouldn't rule that out. And you know, Lance Palmer, despite his really fundamental stand up, and it's just it's more than basic. It's very serviceable. It's gotten him very far, especially against really longer, rangier opponents like Rick Glenn. He's going to be fighting a lanky, rangy guy here, and I don't know how Almeida is going to be able to answer that. Now, on that note, we should also mention that Alessandro's been training with Team Syndicate, especially for a bigger portion of this camp. So that could factor in. I mean, they've done some pretty good things with a lot of fighters in their stand-up, especially guys that are mostly grapplers. So it's going to be interesting to see as well how he adapts, and especially if he sharpens up his counter game when it comes to striking. So I'd like to see how that plays out. Lance Palmer, I'd imagine, would probably be the favorite on this one, but you know what? If the odds are good enough, if there's enough of a payoff on this, I don't think it'd be that crazy to go with Almeida for a submission win on this one. I really wouldn't rule this out. I think it's very possible. I think it's somewhat likely, although I don't rule Lance Palmer out at all. He certainly should be the very almost prohibitive favorite, just in terms of being far more complete, and in terms of being a better athlete, a stronger opponent, and just faster in delivering his strikes.
Well, if Vic's argument has convinced any of you, this might be the right time to take him up on it, because Lance Palmer is a heavy favorite, minus 750 to minus 800. Alejandro Kappa Tau is the underdog, plus 435 to plus 500, and Kappa Tau via submission is actually not one of the prop bets, but Kappa Tau by inside the distance is plus 629. So you could even go a little bit higher if you're assuming that he can only, his best shot of winning is inside the distance.
A little disclaimer, Vic has been drinking, people. Let's not forget about this. Vic has been drinking.
This is true. Hey.
All right.
You may not want to place that bet.
On the note of that disclaimer, it's time to wrap things up. It's the end of the MMA Vivisection. There was another one earlier today, so you can watch that if you missed it. We'll have the sixth round coming up after the fights on Saturday night. Lots more content coming at you all next week. Give us a thumbs up on this video.
I'm sorry, could I just mention something very briefly here?
Go after it.
Okay. Just to mention very briefly, Ryzen Fighting Federation is going to be coming up at the end of the month. Please do not forget that. We very well might be doing a little something on that as well. We're going to have a lot more coverage of the aftermath of this weekend's event too. Quick little plug here, slothreport.com. Once again, slothreport.com. My buddy Josh Vogel. Check out his shit. It's great. You learn a lot of good stuff from it, and of course, as usual, St. Jude's Children's Hospital. Come on, guys, put a little something in the bucket. It's for a good cause.
All right. On that note, you can find me on Twitter at TheZaneSimon. Find Vic on Twitter at VicMRodriguez. Find Eddie on Twitter at Eddie Mercado. Subscribe to MMANation.com. It's DOTCOM for more Bloody Elbow videos, interviews, analysis, all that good stuff. Give us another like, because Lord knows we need it. And we'll see you all next week.
Get in the comments section and tell me how much you love me and hate Vic.
That's right. Or want me to fix my mic, because Lord knows that I'm listening to all of you. All right. Until next week, folks, thanks for tuning in.